So we are talking about sampling and sampling size, how to get a sample out of the population. So in our study, we look at first the two critical terms, the important terms in statistics. Normally it is population and sampling. So we have said population is a set which includes all measurement of the interest to the researcher. And then this other part is called sample, the subset of the population. So in the subset of the population, the white part is the population, the red part is the sample. Now this sample represents all these other population, and that's why you pick a point whereby it will give a representation of other population, of the total population. So the subset is critical in giving us the information about the whole population, and that's why you take only point of interest. You as a researcher, when you're doing a research of a larger population, you'll just pick a small population which will give you information which represents the all other population. Now we have talked about the importance, why sampling is required, and we have looked at getting information about the larger population, whereby we said, number one, less cost, it is very cheap. Number two, less field time, you take the least time possible. Number three, we have talked about more accuracy, it is very accurate. When you have small data, you will be able to do the needful within a shorter period of time, and you will collect the best data out of what you are researching in. And then finally, when it is impossible to study the whole population. So remember, at one point in time, you will not able to study the whole population. So what happens is that you only focus on particular population. So your focus is in a particular grouping of population. And this grouping of population will give you a representation of all other population. So we need to have this in mind. Why we are doing sampling is because it is less cost, it's very cheap. Number two, field time, you take the least time, and then it gives you accurate data. It gives you the best information which will give a representation of the rest population which you have sampled. Is that okay now? So we now come to the target population. The population to be studied, to which the investigator wants to generalize his results. So remember, we have a population and then we have a target population. So the target population is just a representation of the study. Which area are you focusing? Which group are you focusing? Which institution are you focusing? Which campus are you focusing? Which people are you focusing? So this is why you have a population, you have target population, and then sampling unit, the smallest unit from which sample can be selected. So the smallest unit that you will collect your sample is what you call sampling unit. Sampling frame. What do you mean by sampling frame? List of all sampling units from which sample is drawn. List of all sampling units from which sample is drawn. That is what we call sampling frame. And then we have sampling scheme. Method of selecting sampling units from sampling frame. So this is actually your genesis. You move from target population to sample units to sample frame. From sample frame, you move to the sample scheme. Is that right? Now, types of sampling. So this is the area which we need to actually emphasize. Our discussion will be based on types of sampling. Now, in the types of sampling, we have two types of sampling. We have what you call non-probability sampling and probability sampling. Now, in the non-probability sampling, we have convenient sampling, we have purposive sampling, we have snowball sampling, we have quarter sampling. So these are non-probability sampling. So in non-probability sampling, you're not using probability to get your sample. You're not using statistical techniques to get your sample. But now in the probability, we have random, we have systematic, we have clusters, we have stratified, we have multi-stage sampling. So these are the types of sampling and sampling. These are the types of sampling techniques. So we have random sampling, which is under probability, systematic, clusters, stratified, and multi-stage. So we'll discuss each and every type of sampling technique. So number one, in the non-probability sampling, we have convenient sampling, ease of access. Now, what do you mean by convenient sampling? Sample is selected from elements of a population that are easily accessible. Now, when you are collecting data, you decide where you will collect your data. And in the convenient sampling, you collect data on the basis of accessibility. How is it easy to access the data? So when you are actually using convenient sampling data, you just choose. It is on the basis of the convenience. Convenience in the sense that it is easy to access the very data. It is very easy for you to collect that data from a particular point or particular place. Is that okay? Number two, snowball sampling. Friend of friend sampling. Now, when you talk about snowball sampling, this is a type of sampling whereby you just choose maybe your friend or your relative or your neighbor to do the sampling. That is why it is called friend of friend sampling. Now, purposive sampling. Purposive sampling is on the basis of purpose. Your purpose is on your personal judgment. How are you choosing particular sample? Your choice for particular sample is based on your personal judgment, your decisions. You can just look at which area you can do your research and then you decide. Now that is on your personal judgment. You choose who you think should be in the study. That is on your basis. It is you that you are choosing. It is on your own. It is within your limit. It is within your understanding. Then quarter sampling. Now let me say this. I'm giving you assignment. Go and find out what is all about quarter sampling. Is it okay? How do you get the quarter sampling? Now, probability of being chosen is unknown. Cheap but unable to generalize. Now that is quarter sampling, whereby you talk about the probability of choosing particular sample is not known. It is the cheapest way of actually doing sampling techniques. Potential for biasness. It is easy for biasness to be informed. Now the next sampling technique is probability sampling. Now what do you mean by probability sampling? Random sampling. Each subject has known probability of being selected. So the subject that you are bringing into the research has a chance of being used in analyzing or in doing your practical areas of research. So when you talk about random sampling, You just pick a data randomly. You just take a data randomly. For example, there is this game of which game? Ravels, huh? And then you write numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10, and then you are told pick. So any number that you pick, that belongs to you. That is what we call random sampling. Allow application of statistical sampling theory to results to generalize or generalization, and then test the hypothesis. So in the probability sampling, as far as random sampling is concerned, you will actually be able to allow the sampling theories to be put in place. Now the sampling theories provide the generalization and test hypothesis. Now we have two approaches in research. There is what you call induction, and there is what you call deduction. So these are the two sampling or approaches in research. Now induction means you start with theory, you end with generalization of information. Deduction means you start with observation, you end with theory. That is why when you talk about statistical sampling theory, there is a sense of generalization. You make use of theories. Theories are just ideas which people have put in place to help us explain particular scenario. So we need to have this in mind. Random sampling requires the use of theories, and these theories have the sense of generalizing the information and the sense of test hypothesis. Now when you talk about hypothesis is actually the way in which data can be tested. So when you are testing data, we have two types of hypotheses. We have what you call null hypothesis, and we have what you call alternative hypothesis. In the null hypothesis, all data are normally all data are normally against all data are opposite the outcome. So when the data gives the opposite or the negative outcome, we say we are doing null hypothesis. You are actually not accepting. So when you're bringing in the null hypothesis, you talk about not significant. Now, alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis which is not subjected to test. Null hypothesis, you always subject it to what? To test. So when you